find themselves abandoned by relatives and forgotten by the state. So Sadia and her teammates are the lucky few. They're young, they live in the capital, they're educated, and their parents look to a different future. Away from the relative sophistication of Kabul, women still have a mountain to climb. We've been here for about a week, and that's long enough to see the small steps of progress, real progress that's being made. But it's also long enough to see just how far there is to go. This country needs stitching together, and it's debatable whether even a force like NATO can do that. One other thing, Sophie, we seem to have been here at a time of political change, a shift in the mood. People are beginning to talk about talks, if I can put it that way, thinking of a time after the military campaign. Back to you, Sophie.
George, thank you very much. The government has been defeated in the House of Lords over compensation for people who bought ID cards. 12,000 people bought identity cards at a cost of £30 each, but the scheme has since been scrapped. The coalition government was refusing to refund the money, but they have been overruled by the Lords. A man has been charged with the murder of a woman on honeymoon in South Africa. Newlywed Shrien and Annie Dewani from Bristol were travelling in a taxi near Cape Town on Saturday when they were kidnapped. Mr Dewani was released unharmed, but his wife was later found dead. The Scottish and Welsh governments have both been outlining where public spending cuts are likely to come over the next few years. The Scottish government's announced budget cuts of £1.3 billion, which will mean a pay freeze for thousands of public sector workers. The Welsh Assembly government has announced that spending is set to fall. Even the health budget has not escaped. In a moment, more on that from our Wales political editor, Susan Powell. But first, here's our Scotland correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
In Scotland, as in Wales, the decade of rising spending is over. The devolved government in Edinburgh's draft budget is about getting by with less. Trade unionists fear job losses and lower pay. But Scotland's Finance Secretary says keeping wages down is the best way to avoid compulsory redundancies.
I intend to implement a pay freeze, a 0% basic award for all staff in 2011-12, with the exception that staff earning below £21,000 will receive a minimum increase of £250.
Police officer jobs are protected, but chief constables will still cut civilian staff.
87% of the police budget is spent on people, so any substantial reduction in funding will mean a reduction in headcount.
The housing budget's down by almost a fifth. Universities and colleges take a hit too, but there's to be no fewer student places and no tuition fees. NHS spending's going up and prescription charges are to be abolished. And council tax rises are to be scrapped for another year as Holyrood elections loom.
This wasn't really a budget, was it? It was a short-term stopgap budget attempt to get the SNP through the election.
A battle the SNP goes into with only one seat more than Labour. This will also be the first contest since devolution fought amid public spending cuts, presenting new challenges to politicians on all sides here at Holyrood and in the Welsh Assembly.
The message from the Welsh Government: we've done our best. But the budget we've been handed means waving goodbye to a number of big public infrastructure projects. Every department takes a hit, and to Conservative outrage, that means in Wales, unlike elsewhere, the health budget takes a direct cut.
Scotland and Northern Ireland have had a better settlement than we have, but we see health as a priority and we'll do as much as we can to protect it from the cuts being imposed on us by the UK government.
The message being sent out from Cardiff Bay to key voters nearby is that these are Westminster's cuts, Westminster's fault. But if health spending in England and Scotland can be protected, ask these mums, why not in Wales?
I would have thought people would be very angry about it, quite worried about it.
I think you should have a guaranteed level of spending on health.
So like in England, in Wales too, please?
Yes, I would agree.
But in Wales, £4 in every 10 is spent on health. And even nurses argue that health spending can't be fully protected.
We cannot solely protect the NHS Wales budget. That's a very difficult message for politicians to hear, but it's also very difficult coming up to an election for them to sell to the general public.
That's a real challenge for the Liberal Democrats, part of the cutting coalition in Westminster, but facing a tough fight to hold seats in next year's Assembly elections.
It's going to be additionally tough because we have the problem, of course, of the very, very tight UK funding. But we will be holding the Labour-Plaid government here to account.
That this is the toughest settlement since devolution isn't in doubt. The question is what voters make of the competing priorities it lays bare. Bethan Powys, BBC News, Cardiff Bay.
Let's talk now to our economics editor, Stephanie Flanders. How does all this fit in with UK-wide spending cuts?
Well, overall, spending by departments across the UK is due to fall by 11% in real terms between now and 2014. That's after inflation, so it's roughly equivalent to a cash freeze in the budget from now. Now, as you know, in England, George Osborne faced a choice about how to distribute that pain. They made the decision to protect the NHS and give a slightly better settlement to education.